Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. I guess this is the norm now, but I hope you're all at home, safe and in good health. If you're new to the channel, do consider subscribing. We do some pretty fun stuff here. If camera talk and shenanigans is your idea of a good time, also hit that little notification bell icon to keep up with whatever we do here. For those of you who do follow me, you know that a couple of months ago I picked up the new Canon M6 Mark II. It's Canon's latest and greatest crop sensor mirrorless camera. So on Amazon, this camera retails for about 80,000 bucks, including the 15 to 45 mm kit lens. And after using it for a couple of months, vlogging with it, traveling with it, taking pictures with it, I'd have to say I'm thoroughly impressed. Here are my thoughts. This camera is built really well. Like, they've used really high quality material around the whole thing. So from the body, the grip, even like this faux leather that they've used is really nice. The other thing I love about this camera's design, which I love about every Canon camera I use, is its ergonomics. Canon's menus are so well categorized that it's a breeze to navigate through them. And at the same time, the buttons at the back are so well placed and are so customizable that you can optimize this camera for whatever workflow you may have. I love the screen. So as you know, the screen is a flip out screen like this, and it articulates in a couple of different positions. Even the metal that they've used for the screen is really good, and it holds like good tension in whichever position you keep it. It gets pretty bright, but like most screens, it's not great under direct sunlight. My one like qualm with this screen is that it flips open this way and not this way. So if you lift the camera up and you like open the screen, you can't really see what you're shooting because it's like in front of you. So I wish, like, from a design point of view, it would have been nicer if they'd gone with the flip out screen rather than the flip up screen. So the camera itself is pretty lightweight, which in some cases is not the best thing, because that little bit of extra weight would help you stabilize handheld footage. So it would, like, you know, smooth out a couple of like micro jitters and stuff, especially if your lenses don't have inbuilt stabilization. So to be honest, I would have preferred a little bit of extra like heft to the camera. But I guess that's what you get with like a compact mirrorless camera, so it's fine. So my biggest problem with how this camera is designed has to do with the screen in relation to the hot shoe mount. So if you were to put a mic on top of this, you can't really use the screen for two reasons. One, you can't see what you're doing, and two, the screen won't rotate unless it's completely upright. So even if it's a little bit at the back like this, it won't rotate. So you basically can't use the screen at all while you have a mic or anything on the hot shoe mount, which I think is like a pretty stupid design choice if you ask me. But there is fortunately a very simple workaround for this. You have to buy something called a cold shoe mount. So I have one from a company called Ulanzi, I don't know. It costs like $1,000 on Amazon. Basically, if there are no electronics in this thing, it's called a cold shoe mount. If there are electronics like this, then it's a hot shoe mount. You just attach this to the bottom of your camera, and then you can attach the mic to the side of your camera and then just use the mic. So really, it's a pretty easy and inexpensive workaround for this problem. I just think from a design point of view, it was kind of dumb on Canon's part. So the M6 Mark II uses Canon LPE17 batteries. As you can see, they're pretty tiny, so they don't have as good a battery life as say the 5D Mark IV, the EOS R, or even the 90D. But personally for me, after I bought a spare and just used them in rotation, I didn't really have a problem. So I just charged one and used the other while that was charging and then switched, and it seemed to work fine. Basically, it'll be different for different people in different situations depending on how much you use the camera in that period of time. But so far for me, with two batteries, I haven't had a problem. This camera uses an APS-C sensor, which basically crops your image in by 1.6 times. So without complicating things too much, it makes this 15 to 45 mm lens actually a 24 to 72 mm lens. So think about it like that. But coming back to the camera sensor, it has 32.5 usable megapixels, which is pretty crazy because something like the 5D has only like 30. So for the price, you're getting a really high quality stills camera for travel photography, street photography, or even just making thumbnails for YouTube. The only downside of using this camera as a stills camera is that it doesn't have an inbuilt viewfinder, which I really liked from all the previous DSLRs that I've used. You can, however, pick up an external viewfinder, which I did. The only problem is that I'm using this camera for photo and video almost simultaneously, like I'm jumping back and forth between the two. So you come back to the same problem where the viewfinder and the screen aren't going to work at the same time. So you'll have to like take this off and then flip this off, and it's a hassle, which nobody wants. So unless you're using this camera primarily as a stills camera, I would save the money. I make the mistakes so you don't have to. So the video specs of this camera are also really quite impressive. It maxes out at 4K 30 FPS with dual pixel autofocus, and here's the kicker, there is no crop. This camera is the first camera in Canon's lineup, other than their like high-end cinema cameras, that doesn't crop in when you shoot in 4K. Even something like the 5D Mark IV or even the newer EOS R all crop into the sensor when using 4K, and this doesn't. So this is like a game changer for people who've been asking for like a more convenient form of 4K in Canon. This is their answer. This camera also shoots 120 frames per second in 1080, which is crazy because something like the 5D Mark IV or even the EOS R shoot 120 frames but in 720p. The only thing is that you don't get dual pixel autofocus on this or sound recording when shooting in that higher frame rate. So that's something to consider. However, there is one weird thing that Canon's done to this camera, which they've done to a couple of others as well in the recent past, is that they've not given this camera 24 frames per second, which is something I really like because I'd want that cinematic motion blur that you get at 24 frames per second. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world because we in India shoot in PAL, so we can just shoot at 25 frames per second, which is what I'm doing now, and it doesn't really matter, like you guys can't really tell. And the other thing is that because the whole community was in uproar about this whole thing, Canon's coming up with a firmware update sometime in the next couple of months, which will give this camera 24 frames per second. So it isn't really a problem, it's just that if you want 24 frames per second right now, this camera might not be for you. This camera shoots in a compression format called IPB, which to be honest is not the best for color grading because it compresses the image quite a bit and you don't have a lot of data to manipulate in post-production. The other thing is that this camera doesn't have the best dynamic range, meaning the camera is not very good at seeing information in the brightest and darkest parts of the image. One fix for both these things, which is what I do, is I shoot in a neutral profile. And here are some custom settings that help me just get the most dynamic range out of the camera, as well as give me a little more flexibility while I'm trying to change colors or create my own look in post. In terms of low light performance, this camera does perform pretty well. You still get a pretty clean image at around ISO 1600. So paired with the right fast lens, you can actually get some really good clean images even in the night. The audio coming straight out of this camera is good, but I would still recommend using something like a Rode Video Micro or any kind of mountable mic. And one problem is that there is no headphone jack, so you can't really monitor audio if you're, say, using this to take an interview or something like that. So that's something to take into consideration as well. The good thing about APS-C or crop sensor cameras is that their lenses are way more compact, and more importantly, they are way cheaper. Like if you were to buy a similar lens for full frame for Canon, it would cost you like over $1 lakh. So this camera uses Canon's EF-M mount, which uses Canon EF-M lenses. Now the problem, unfortunately, is that the Canon EF-M line of lenses are just not the best. One, there aren't too many options, and two, they just aren't the sharpest. So you're not really getting 100% output for that 32 megapixel sensor or 4K recording. This problem, however, has been solved by a company called Sigma. For those of you who don't know, Sigma makes really high quality affordable lenses, and they've just released 3 prime lenses for the Canon EF-M mount, which I think will really unlock this camera's full potential, and I'm just stoked to get my hands on one after this lockdown is done, and be sure to watch out for that review. Of course, if you're coming from owning a Canon DSLR and you do have EF lenses lying around, you can definitely think about adapting them onto this camera using a speed booster or an adapter. The only problem is that you then have another element in between the sensor, and at the same time it kind of defeats the purpose of buying a small compact camera, in my opinion. Taking into consideration the amazing specs this camera has to offer, for 80,000 bucks, it's honestly a steal, because other cameras with this build with similar specifications cost nearly twice as much. And with the fact that 24 FPS is on its way and Sigma has released its new line of lenses, honestly buying this camera is a no-brainer. However, if you're someone who wants to buy a camera as a casual hobby, be it to photograph your kids or record your mother's birthday or just dip your toes into this field, then I'd recommend something less expensive like the Canon M50, the Canon M200, or even similar DSLR versions of those cameras. This camera, on the other hand, the Canon M6 Mark II, is, in my opinion, the perfect camera for travel photographers, travel videographers, vloggers, and anyone who wants to create a professional persona on social media. And as our industry is now evolving, clients are often asking for content for social media. So this camera could also get you started as a professional filmmaker and content creator. And that's it from me, guys. I hope you found this video insightful. I hope it helps you make an informed decision. If you like this video, then hit that like button. If you really liked it, then subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments below what you guys want to see next. Till then, bye.